Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The battle for a starting cornerback job in this secondary just found a genuinely unexpected new contender, and very few people heading into this offseason saw this development coming this early. A rookie selected in this year's draft is suddenly emerging as a legitimate candidate to earn a significant defensive role, taking direct advantage of the uncertainty currently surrounding Terrion Arnold. What initially looked like a quiet development season has the genuine potential to transform into a golden opportunity for Keith Abney II to prove he belongs as far more than just a depth piece on this roster. The situation surrounding Arnold continues raising legitimate questions throughout this entire fan base, after arriving with genuinely high expectations as a former first-round selection. The young cornerback now finds himself navigating a deeply uncertain situation. While his primary focus is obviously and understandably centered on resolving matters off the football field, there are also unavoidable practical implications for this roster that deserve real attention. The competition for a starting cornerback spot has suddenly become genuinely wide open. The original plan heading into this season had Arnold lining up directly opposite DJ Reed, forming what looked like a genuinely promising starting cornerback tandem. But whenever this kind of unexpected uncertainty develops, it inevitably creates an opportunity for someone else to step forward and potentially change the entire trajectory of their own career. That is exactly where Keith Abney II enters this conversation. Selected in the 5th round of this year's draft, he did not receive nearly the same level of national attention as some of the higher-profile prospects in this class, but his specific skill set genuinely impressed evaluators throughout the entire pre-draft process. Despite not possessing the ideal physical size traditionally associated with outside cornerbacks, Abney has consistently compensated for that limitation with outstanding instincts, genuine explosiveness, and elite anticipation. Many analysts projected him as a nickel cornerback specifically at the professional level, but throughout his collegiate career, he repeatedly demonstrated the ability to successfully line up on the outside against significantly bigger receivers without ever backing down from that challenge. His collegiate career at Arizona State helps explain exactly why so many people within this organization genuinely believe in his long-term potential. Across just 25 career starts for the Sun Devils, Abney recorded 5 interceptions and broke up 21 total passes. Even more impressive than those raw statistics was his overall efficiency in coverage. Opposing quarterbacks completed just 4% of passes thrown specifically in his direction, an outstanding number for any defensive back, but particularly notable given that he frequently matched up directly against opposing teams' top receiving threats. His ability to stay genuinely glued to his coverage assignment throughout the entire duration of routes became one of his defining traits at the collegiate level, showcasing exactly the kind of natural instincts that simply cannot be effectively coached or taught. Of course, there remain real areas of his game that genuinely need continued development and refinement. The biggest concern scouts consistently raised throughout the draft evaluation process centered on his overall discipline on the field. At times, Abney's inherently aggressive playing style led directly to unnecessary penalties, specifically because he was constantly attempting to make the spectacular big play rather than simply playing within the structure of the defense. That competitive mindset can absolutely become a tremendous strength when properly controlled and channeled, but it can equally become a genuine liability at the NFL level, where defensive penalties are enforced significantly more strictly than at the collegiate level. That specific discipline question will likely be one of the primary things this coaching staff closely monitors throughout the entirety of training camp. Another significant factor working genuinely in Abney's favor right now is this organization's clear and pressing need to improve its overall pass defense. Last season, the Lions allowed 22.4 points per game, ranking among the 10 worst scoring defenses in the entire league. This unit also finished near the very bottom of the league in total passing yards allowed per game, highlighting exactly how much this secondary struggled to consistently prevent explosive plays throughout last season. That kind of defensive inconsistency became a genuinely recurring issue across the entire season, making it even more critically important for this coaching staff to identify and develop players genuinely capable of competing at a consistently high level on every single defensive snap. Even as a fifth-round selection, Keith Abney II may have landed in precisely the right organizational situation to genuinely accelerate his own development timeline. The underlying talent has clearly always been there. His effort level and competitive spirit have never once been seriously questioned by anyone who has evaluated him. The real challenge now becomes proving himself consistently, day after day, throughout the entirety of training camp. That means limiting the kind of costly mistakes that sometimes accompany his naturally aggressive playing style, while simultaneously demonstrating to this coaching staff that he can consistently compete at a high level against genuine NFL-caliber receiving talent. If he successfully accomplishes both of those specific goals, there exists a genuinely realistic and credible path for him to earn a starting defensive role significantly sooner than anyone reasonably expected when his name was first called on draft night. The opportunity is now completely and entirely in his own hands. Now let us shift to the broader trade market conversation, because the Detroit Lions could genuinely be facing an important strategic decision to keep this defense competitive, and the realistic answer to this suddenly urgent question might actually be found in Denver. Following everything that has developed with Terrion Arnold, this front office needs to act with real urgency to prevent one of the most important positions on this entire defense from becoming a genuine weakness right before a season carrying genuinely high organizational expectations. While Detroit certainly still has legitimate internal options available on this current roster, relying purely and exclusively on internal development genuinely represents too significant a gamble for an organization with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations this season. This coaching staff clearly understands the real value of developing young talent, but proven experience and week-to-week consistency can make an enormous difference once the regular season actually begins in earnest. That is precisely why the broader trade market has emerged as a significantly more attractive solution than simply hoping an unproven player unexpectedly breaks out under pressure. Among the names currently being discussed, one player continues to stand out specifically: Denver Broncos cornerback Riley Moss. When you take a genuinely closer look at Riley Moss's overall profile, it becomes considerably easier to understand exactly why he is emerging as one of the strongest realistic candidates to meaningfully strengthen this Detroit secondary. Every single fan would obviously love to see a true elite superstar arrive through trade, but that is simply not how the realistic NFL trade market actually functions. Cornerbacks at the level of a true elite shutdown corner simply are not genuinely available, especially when those specific players are under contract with organizations actively competing for championships themselves. Other recognizable names, including Denzel Ward, have similarly surfaced in broader speculation, but the realistic acquisition cost for a player of that caliber from Cleveland would likely far outweigh the actual practical benefit relative to other available options. Moss, by contrast, represents exactly the type of player that genuinely smart, well-run organizations consistently target in these situations. Young, still actively developing and improving, and realistically available at a genuinely reasonable acquisition cost. At just 26 years old and originally selected in the 3rd round of the 2023 draft, Moss started literally every single game for the Broncos last season. His overall performance throughout that season was genuinely solid across the board, but one specific area of his game stands out even more prominently than the rest: Against the run specifically, Moss posted genuinely impressive statistical numbers, which aligns perfectly with one of Dan Campbell's single biggest defensive priorities as a head coach. The Lions have built their entire defensive identity around physical, relentlessly effortful football, specifically designed to shut down opposing rushing attacks. In that exact regard, Moss appears to represent a genuinely ideal schematic fit for Detroit's overall defensive system and philosophy. It is honestly true that some of his statistical concerns will legitimately worry portions of this fan base. Riley Moss allowed 7 touchdown receptions in coverage last season, a number that will certainly factor prominently into any broader discussion about his overall fit and value. However, it remains genuinely important to view those specific numbers within proper context before reaching any premature conclusions. The overall cornerback trade market remains extremely limited at any given time, and finding a young, genuinely productive player who still has real room to grow and develop further is not an easy thing to accomplish. Moss is still very much in his developmental arc as a player, and he has already demonstrated real qualities that could genuinely be elevated and maximized within Detroit's specific defensive structure and scheme. More importantly, the Lions do not necessarily need to acquire a statistically perfect cornerback through this kind of move. They need someone genuinely capable of stepping directly into the starting lineup immediately while continuing to develop and improve over time within this system. That specific profile makes considerably more practical sense than spending massive amounts of draft capital or other valuable roster assets on an aging veteran who may have already reached the peak of his own career trajectory. Dan Campbell has consistently and publicly valued players who bring genuine toughness, real competitiveness, and a demonstrated willingness to continue developing within his specific system. Riley Moss genuinely checks every single one of those boxes. From Denver's organizational perspective, there are also plenty of legitimate reasons to seriously consider making this kind of deal happen. The Broncos have already committed truly massive financial resources to Patrick Surtain, making him the highest-paid cornerback in the entire NFL. They have also invested a first-round draft selection in another young cornerback, clearly signaling that this organization is already actively planning for its long-term future at this specific position. On top of those investments, they currently have enough additional depth at the position to realistically absorb Moss's potential departure without completely weakening their overall secondary. Another genuinely key factor here involves his current contract situation. Riley Moss is currently entering the final year of his original rookie contract, which means Denver must soon make a genuine decision about whether to offer him an expensive long-term extension or instead trade him now while his overall trade value realistically remains at its highest point. Many NFL organizations choose to move genuinely productive players in this exact specific situation specifically to gain additional financial flexibility while continuing to build a more balanced overall roster. As for realistic trade compensation, Detroit could likely put together a genuinely reasonable package without sacrificing any significant portion of this organization's long-term future assets. An opening offer consisting of a 4th-round selection combined with a 6th-round selection seems like a genuinely logical starting point for these kinds of negotiations. If the Broncos ultimately push for additional value, including a 3rd-round selection in that package would probably prove sufficient to get a realistic deal across the finish line. Considering the genuine importance of the cornerback position and Detroit's immediate pressing need at this exact spot, that kind of realistic price would be genuinely well worth paying. The Lions would be acquiring a young, starting-caliber player with real remaining upside who perfectly fits the physical, aggressive defensive identity Dan Campbell has worked to build throughout his tenure. Instead of continuing to rely purely on unproven internal options or simply hoping someone unexpectedly emerges as the season progresses, Detroit would be immediately and meaningfully strengthening one of this roster's biggest current question marks. At the end of the day, while it remains genuinely exciting to dream about splashy blockbuster acquisitions, the smartest and most sustainable organizational moves are frequently the ones that take full advantage of these kinds of genuinely realistic opportunities. Riley Moss checks nearly every single box this organization should realistically be looking for at this position right now. Perhaps it really is time for Dan Campbell to pick up the phone and call his longtime friend and former colleague in Denver to see if a realistic deal can genuinely get accomplished before training camp opens. Lions fans, we want your honest thoughts in the comments section right now. Do you genuinely believe Keith Abney II has what it takes to win an outright starting cornerback job and surprise this entire league as a fifth-round rookie this season? Or do you believe this organization still needs to find an additional outside solution at this position regardless of his development? And would you personally make this specific trade for Riley Moss? Or would you prefer this front office pursue a different player entirely to strengthen this secondary? Drop everything you have got in the comments section below, and if you made it all the way to the end of this video, comment "Go Lions" so we know exactly who stayed with us until the very end. See you in the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.